I didn't expect to start respecting Connor. If anything, I was pretty sure I couldn't stand him. We met on a Monday morning that already felt like it was going to be a problem. New project, new team, same pressure. I'd barely had my coffee when our manager introduced him like he was some kind of solution. This is Connor. He'll be leading alongside Gilbert. Alongside. That word stuck with me immediately, because I didn't need someone alongside me. I'd been there longer. I knew how things worked. I knew the team, the clients, the pace. And then this guy just walks in, calm, composed, like he belongs there just as much as I do. Maybe more. He shook my hand like we were equals. Good to finally meet you, he said. Finally? I forced a polite smile. Yeah, same. It wasn't. From the start, everything about him got under my skin. Not in an obvious way. He wasn't arrogant. He didn't interrupt people. He didn't try to dominate conversations. That would have been easier to deal with. Instead, he listened. And when he spoke, people paid attention. That was the problem. In our first team meeting, I laid out a plan I'd been working on for weeks. Structured, detailed, solid. I knew it was good. I'd spent too many late nights making sure it was. Connor nodded along the entire time. No interruptions. No weird expressions. Then our manager turned to him. Thoughts? He leaned back slightly, thoughtful. Not rushing. I think it's strong, he said. Especially the timeline structure. I relaxed a little. Of course it was strong. Then he added, but I wonder if we're missing a chance to simplify the rollout. And just like that, the room shifted. Not dramatically, but enough. He didn't tear my plan apart. He adjusted it, reframed it, made it cleaner, more efficient. People started nodding, asking him questions. I sat there, listening to my own work being improved in real time, and I hated how much sense he was making. After the meeting, I caught up to him in the hallway. You could have brought that up with me first, I said. He looked at me, not defensive, just calm. I figured it was better to discuss it openly. I crossed my arms. Or you wanted to make a point. He held my gaze for a second, like he was deciding how honest to be. I wanted the project to be better, he said simply. That should have ended the conversation. But something about the way he said it, no edge, no ego, made it worse. Because I couldn't call him out for something he wasn't doing. From that point on, it became a quiet competition. Not official, not acknowledged, but real. We started noticing each other's contributions more than anyone else's. Every suggestion, every idea, every time one of us got praised. If he spoke, I found a way to refine it. If I presented something, he'd find a way to sharpen it. It wasn't hostile, but it wasn't friendly either. One evening, we both stayed late. Not unusual. Deadlines were coming up, and the office had that quiet, almost intimate atmosphere it gets after hours. I was at my desk, reworking part of the strategy he'd suggested earlier. Not because I had to, because I wanted to prove I could do it better. Still here, his voice came from behind me. I didn't turn around immediately. Obviously, he stepped closer, glancing at my screen. You changed the structure. Yeah, I said. It works better this way. He studied it for a moment, longer than I liked. Then he nodded. It does. I blinked, caught off guard. That's it, I asked, turning to face him. No adjustment? No, but we could also. A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. You want me to argue? No, I said quickly. Then, after a beat, maybe. He leaned against the edge of the desk, casual, comfortable. I don't argue for the sake of it, he said. If something's good, it's good. I watched him for a second, trying to figure out if there was something underneath that. Some hidden competitiveness like mine. But there wasn't. And that annoyed me more than anything. Must be nice, I muttered. What? Not caring about winning. He frowned slightly. Who said I don't care? I let out a quiet laugh. Come on, Connor. You walk in here, take apart my work in a meeting, and then act like it's all just teamwork. It is teamwork. It doesn't feel like it. There it was. Honest. Maybe more than I intended. He didn't react right away. Just looked at me, really looked this time. Gilbert, he said slowly, I'm not trying to compete with you. I shook my head. That's exactly what someone would say. That's exactly what someone who's not competing would say. I rolled my eyes, but there was no real heat behind it. Silence settled between us for a moment. Then he said, quieter, I actually think you're really good at what you do. That stopped me. Not because it was dramatic, but because it sounded real. I studied his face, looking for sarcasm. For anything that would let me dismiss it. There was nothing. Then why does it feel like you're constantly proving something? I asked. He hesitated. And for the first time since I met him, He didn't look completely composed. "I'm not trying to prove anything to you," he said. "Maybe to myself." That wasn't the answer I expected, and I didn't know what to do with it. We stood there in that quiet office, the tension shifting into something I couldn't quite name yet. Not rivalry. Not exactly. But something that made me realize, for the first time, that maybe I didn't actually understand Connor at all. And that bothered me more than losing ever could. I didn't plan to think about what Connor said, but I did, more than I wanted to admit. Maybe to myself. That line stayed in my head longer than anything else. Not because it was dramatic, but because it didn't fit the version of him I'd already built. In my head, Connor was controlled. Intentional. Someone who walked into a room knowing exactly what he was doing and why. Not someone trying to prove something to himself. The next few days felt different. Not in a big, obvious way. We still worked the same way back and forth, refining ideas, pushing each other without saying it out loud. But I started noticing things I hadn't before. Like how he stayed quiet longer than necessary in meetings, like he was giving other people space on purpose. Or how he'd sometimes stop mid-sentence, rethink something, and adjust not to be right, but to be clear. It didn't feel like competition anymore. It felt like discipline, and that made it harder to dislike him. One afternoon, we got assigned to present together. Big client. High stakes. The kind of thing where one mistake sticks. We stayed late again, going over everything. "You always over-prepare like this?" he asked, scrolling through the slides. "Yes," I said. "That's why my stuff works." He nodded. "Fair." I glanced at him. "You don't." "I prepare," he said. "Just differently." Meaning? He leaned back in his chair, thinking. I try to understand the room more than the material. I frowned. "That sounds like an excuse." He smiled slightly. "Or it's the reason people listen." I didn't like that answer. Mostly because I had a feeling he was right. We ran through the presentation once. Then again. At some point, I stopped noticing the time. "Pause," he said suddenly. "What? You're rushing this part." "I'm not rushing." "You are," he said calmly. "You're anticipating their reaction before they even have one." I opened my mouth to argue, then stopped. Because he wasn't wrong. "That's not a bad instinct," he added. "It just makes you sound like you're defending something instead of presenting it." I leaned back, exhaling slowly. "So what? I just slow down." "Not just slow down," he said. "Trust that what you're saying is enough." That hit harder than it should have. I didn't respond right away. He watched me for a second, then softened slightly. "You don't have to prove everything in the first sentence." I let out a quiet laugh. "You've thought about this a lot." "Yeah," he said, "because I used to do the same thing." I looked at him, really looked this time. "You?" I said. "No way." He shrugged. "Not everyone starts out confident. You seem pretty confident now." He hesitated, then said, "It's not confidence. It's just experience surviving being wrong." That made me smile. Despite myself. "Okay," I said. "That's actually a good line." "I have a few," he replied. There was a pause. Not awkward. Just lighter than before. For the first time since we started working together, I didn't feel like I needed to be on guard around him. And that was new. The presentation went better than expected. Not perfect, but strong. We moved through it smoothly, handing off to each other without stepping over one another. It didn't feel like two people trying to outdo each other. It felt aligned. Afterward, as we walked out of the meeting room, our manager gave us a nod. That worked really well. I glanced at Connor. He just nodded back, like it was expected. Outside, in the hallway, I stopped. "That was good," I said. He looked at me. "Yeah, it was." Another pause. Then I added, "You were right." He raised an eyebrow. "About." "Slowing down," I said, reading the room. He didn't smile in a smug way. Just acknowledged it. "You were right too," he said. I frowned. "About what?" "Structure," he replied. Without that, it wouldn't have landed. Something about that exchange felt balanced, equal, not forced. And I realized something in that moment that I hadn't expected. I didn't feel like I'd lost. I didn't feel like he'd won. For the first time, it felt like neither of us needed to. Later that evening, we ended up at the same bar as a few coworkers. Nothing formal, just a way to unwind after the presentation. I wasn't planning to stay long. Connor was already there when I arrived, sitting at the end of the table, half listening to a conversation while nursing a drink. I took a seat across from him. He glanced up. "You stayed. Don't sound so surprised." "I'm not," he said. "Just noting it." I rolled my eyes, but there was no edge to it. The conversation around us was loud, scattered. People talking over each other, laughing too easily. At some point, it shifted and someone asked, "So how do you two not kill each other working together?" I almost answered immediately, but Connor spoke first. "We don't compete," he said. I looked at him. That wasn't true. Or at least it hadn't been. The others laughed, clearly not convinced. "Sure," someone said. "You both have that look." "What look?" I asked. "The I need to be right look," they replied. Connor smiled slightly. "That's not about being right." "Then what is it?" I asked before I could stop myself. He glanced at me, just for a second. "Getting it right," he said. That landed differently. Not sharp, not defensive, just honest. And I realized, sitting there across from him, that somewhere along the way, something had shifted. I didn't see him as a threat anymore. Not really. And that made something else settle in my chest quiet. Unexpected. Respect. I wasn't ready to say it out loud yet. But it was there. And it was growing. Respect wasn't something I gave easily. Especially not to someone I'd already decided was my competition. But with Connor, it stopped feeling like a choice. It just kind of happened. Not all at once. Not in some big realization. More like small moments stacking up until I couldn't ignore it anymore. Like the morning everything almost went wrong. We had a deadline that week, tight, unrealistic, the kind that makes everyone slightly on edge. I came in early, already stressed, already running through everything that could fall apart. And of course, something did. One of the key pieces of our project data we'd been building everything around was off. Not slightly, completely unusable. I stared at the screen, my chest tightening. "Tell me this is a formatting issue," I muttered. Connor was at his desk across from me. He rolled his chair closer, looking over my shoulder. "It's not," he said after a few seconds. "Great," I exhaled. "That's just great." My brain immediately went into overdrive: how to fix it, how to rebuild, how much time we didn't have. "We're going to have to redo half of this," I said. "Yeah," he replied calmly. I turned to him, already frustrated. "You don't sound worried." "I am," he said. "Just not panicking." "Good for you." That came out sharper than I intended. He didn't react to it. Instead, he asked, "What's the first thing that actually needs to be fixed?" I frowned. "All of it." "That's not true," he said. "What's the first thing?" I hesitated. Because under the frustration, I knew what he was doing. Breaking it down. Making it manageable. I leaned back slightly, running a hand through my hair. "The projections," I said finally. "If those don't make sense, nothing else does." He nodded. "Okay, then we start there." I watched him for a second. "You're really not going to freak out about this?" I asked. He glanced at me. "Will it help?" "No." "Then I'll skip that part." I let out a quiet breath. Not quite a laugh. "Right," I said. "Of course you will." We got to work. And this is where I noticed it the most. Connor didn't take over. He didn't try to control the situation or prove he had a better way. He just stayed steady. When I got too far ahead, he pulled me back. When I missed something, he pointed it out without making it a big deal. At one point, I got stuck on a section that just wouldn't line up no matter how many times I adjusted it. "This doesn't make sense," I muttered. "It should work." "Show me," he said. I explained it, probably too fast, half talking to myself at that point. He listened. Actually listened. Then he said, "You're solving for the wrong variable." I paused. "What?" "You're trying to force the outcome instead of checking the assumption," he explained. I stared at the screen, then back at him. "Say that again." He repeated it, slower this time. And just like that, it clicked. "Wait," I said, already adjusting things. "If that's wrong, then..." "Yeah," he nodded. "Everything shifts." I made the change. And suddenly, it worked. Not perfectly, but enough. I leaned back, exhaling. "Okay, that's yeah. That fixes it." Connor smiled slightly. "Good." I looked at him. "You didn't even hesitate," I said. "You just saw it." He shrugged. "I've made that mistake before." "Still," I said. "That was..." I stopped myself, because I wasn't used to saying it. But he waited. Not pushing. Just there. "That was really good," I finished. He nodded once. "So was what you did earlier." I shook my head, a small smile slipping through. "You're impossible to argue with." "I've been told that," he said. "We worked like that for hours. No tension, no competition. Just two people trying to get something right." And it felt this was the part one didn't expect. It felt easy. Later, when we finally stepped away from our desks, the office mostly empty again, I realized I wasn't exhausted in the usual way. I wasn't drained from proving something. I was just tired. Normal tired. "You heading out?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. Then, after a second, you? In a bit. I grabbed my things, then hesitated. You handled that well today, I said. He looked up. So did you. I shook my head. No, I mean it. I would have probably made it worse if you weren't there. He studied me for a moment. Gilbert, he said, you would have figured it out. Eventually, I replied. Just slower. And with more damage. A small pause. Then he said, quieter, you don't give yourself enough credit. I let out a soft laugh. That's ironic coming from you. He raised an eyebrow. Why? Because you act like everything you do is just standard, I said. Like none of it's a big deal. It's not a big deal, he said. It's just work. That's not true, I replied. You're good at this. Really good. He didn't answer right away. And for the first time, I saw something shift in his expression, not confidence, not calm. Something closer to uncertainty. I just try not to mess things up, he said. That surprised me. That's it? I asked. He nodded. Pretty much. I looked at him for a long second, because that didn't match the version of him I'd built at all. And suddenly, all those moments, him pausing before speaking, him choosing his words carefully, him staying steady instead of reactive, they made more sense. He wasn't trying to win. He was trying not to fail. And somehow, that made me respect him even more. Connor, I said, more serious now, you don't just not mess things up. He looked at me. You make things better, I finished. Silence settled between us. Not awkward, just real. He held my gaze for a second longer than usual, like he wasn't sure what to do with that. Thanks, he said finally. Simple, but it felt like it meant more than that. I nodded, then turned toward the door. And as I walked out, I realized something had changed again. I wasn't thinking about how to outdo him tomorrow. I was thinking about how much easier things felt when he was there. And that thought, that was new. If you'd asked me a week earlier what I thought of Connor, I would have said something like, annoying, too calm, thinks he's always right. Now, I didn't really have an answer. And that bothered me more than anything, because it meant I had to rethink everything I'd already decided about him. It started showing up in small ways. Like how I'd catch myself looking for his reaction first in meetings, not to challenge it, but to understand it. Or how I'd start explaining something, then pause halfway through because I knew exactly what he was going to say next. And the worst part? He was usually right. Not in an I win kind of way. In a way that made things clearer. That made me better. Which, if I'm being honest, was something I wasn't used to admitting about anyone. Especially not someone I used to see as competition. One afternoon, we ended up alone again in one of the smaller meeting rooms. No deadline this time. Just planning ahead. Going over ideas before presenting them to the rest of the team. It should have felt routine. It didn't. Okay, I said, pointing at the screen. If we go this direction, we'll need to adjust the entire second phase. Connor nodded. Yeah, but it'll make the first phase stronger. I glanced at him. You're okay sacrificing that. I'm okay making the overall result better, he replied. I leaned back in my chair, studying him. You always think like that? I asked. Like what? Like the end result matters more than your part in it. He shrugged slightly. Doesn't it? I didn't answer right away. Because no, that wasn't how I usually thought. I thought about my part, my work, my contribution, how it reflected on me. And suddenly, I realized how different that was from him. You don't care if you're the one who came up with the idea, I said slowly. He frowned a little, like the question didn't quite make sense. Why would I? I let out a quiet breath. Most people do. Do you? He asked. I hesitated. Then, honest before I could stop myself. Yeah. He didn't judge that. Didn't even look surprised. He just nodded. That makes sense. That's it, I said. No lecture about teamwork. A small smile. You already know that part. I shook my head, but I couldn't help the slight smile that followed. There it was again. That ease. That lack of pressure I didn't realize I'd been carrying. At some point, the conversation drifted. Away from work. Not abruptly. Just naturally. You've been here longer than me, right? He asked. Yeah, I said. A few years. You always wanted to do this? I leaned back, thinking. I don't know if anyone grows up wanting this specifically. But yeah, something like it. He nodded. You're good at it. I huffed a quiet laugh. You keep saying that. Because it's true. I looked at him. You don't say things just to say them, do you? No, he said simply. Yeah, I muttered. I noticed. A pause settled between us. Not awkward. Just slower. More personal. What about you? I asked. You always planned this. He shook his head slightly. Not really. So how'd you end up here? He leaned back, eyes drifting for a second like he was deciding how much to share. I messed up a lot of things before this, he said. That caught my attention. You? I said. Hard to believe. He smiled faintly, but there was no humor in it. Yeah, me. I didn't interrupt. Didn't push. Just waited. I used to rush everything, he continued. Decisions, work, people. I thought if I moved fast enough, I'd stay ahead of mistakes. And I asked quietly. And I just made bigger ones, he said. That landed heavier than I expected. Because it wasn't dramatic. It was honest. I had to learn to slow down, he added. Actually think. Actually listen. I studied him for a moment. So all that calm. I said, that's learned. He nodded. Every bit of it. I let out a quiet breath. That changed something. Because suddenly, he wasn't just naturally better. He worked for it. Just in a different way than I did. That makes more sense, I said. What does? Why you don't react the way I expect you to, I replied. He raised an eyebrow. And how do you expect me to react? Like me, I said honestly. He smiled slightly. That would be a problem. I laughed under my breath. Yeah, probably. The room felt quieter after that. Not in a heavy way. In a comfortable way. Which, again, was new. I wasn't used to feeling comfortable around someone I used to compete with. You know, I said after a moment. I really thought I was going to hate working with you. He didn't look surprised. Yeah, he said. I got that impression. Good, I replied. At least I wasn't subtle. You weren't, he confirmed. I shook my head, smiling slightly. And now, I stopped. Because I wasn't sure how to finish that sentence. He waited. Not pushing. Just giving me space to figure it out. And that's when it hit me. I didn't feel threatened by him anymore. I didn't feel like I had to prove something every time he spoke. I didn't feel like I was losing anything by admitting he was good. If anything, I felt like I was gaining something by working with him. And now, he asked. I met his eyes. And for once, I didn't overthink it. Now I'm glad you're here, I said. Simple, honest, real. Something in his expression softened. Not dramatically, just enough. Yeah, he said quietly. Me too. And that was the moment I stopped seeing him as a rival. Not completely. Old habits don't disappear that fast. But enough. Enough to know that whatever this was, it wasn't competition anymore. It was something better. And I wasn't used to that. But I wasn't pushing it away either. The shift didn't happen all at once. I still had moments where that old instinct kicked in where I'd hear Connor say something in a meeting and immediately think, okay, how do I improve that? But now it wasn't about beating him. It was about building on it. And that difference changed everything. A few weeks in, people started noticing. Not directly at first. Just small comments. You two work weirdly well together. Honestly, it's kind of unfair. I don't know how you're not stepping on each other constantly. I used to think the same thing. Now, it just felt normal. One evening, we stayed late again. Not because we had to, but because we were in the middle of something and neither of us wanted to leave it unfinished. The office was quiet. Lights dimmed in half the rooms. That familiar after-hours stillness. Connor was sitting across from me, sleeves slightly rolled up, focused in that way he always was when he was deep into something. I caught myself watching him for a second longer than I meant to. Not in a weird way. Just noticing. You're doing it again, he said without looking up. Doing what? Overthinking, he replied. I frowned. I'm literally just sitting here. Yeah, he said, glancing at me now. But I can see it on your face. I scoffed. You can't read my face that well. He tilted his head slightly. You were about to change something that doesn't need changing. I paused. Because that was exactly what I was about to do. Okay, that's annoying, I admitted. A small smile. I'll take that as a compliment. You shouldn't, I said. It means you're getting too good at this. At what? Knowing how I think. He didn't answer right away. And something about that silence felt different. Maybe you're just predictable, he said finally. I narrowed my eyes. Careful. He smiled, but softer this time. Not in a bad way. Sure. I mean it, he added. You're consistent. You care about getting things right. You just push too hard sometimes. I leaned back, crossing my arms. And you don't. I used to, he said. Now I just try to pick the right moments. I watched him for a second. You make that sound easy. It's not, he replied. I just don't let it show anymore. There it was again. That honesty that didn't feel forced. It made it really hard to keep any kind of wall up. At some point, we both just stopped working. Not intentionally. Just drifted out of it. The conversation shifted. Again. Can I ask you something? I said. He nodded. Yeah. First week, I started. When you came in, did you see me as competition? He didn't even hesitate. Yeah. I blinked. That was fast. He shrugged slightly. You were good. Established. Confident. Of course I did. That should have felt validating. But instead, I was more curious about what came next. And now? I asked. He looked at me. Really looked. And for once, I had no idea what he was going to say. Now I think I got lucky, he said. That caught me off guard. Lucky? I repeated. Yeah, he said. Because I don't have to do this alone. Something about that hit deeper than I expected. Because it wasn't about me being better, or him being better. It was about both of us. I exhaled slowly, looking down at the desk for a second. That's not what I expected you to say, I admitted. What did you expect? I don't know, I said. Something more neutral. He smiled slightly. I'm not very good at neutral. I noticed. Silence settled again. But this time, it felt heavier. Not uncomfortable. Just real. You know, I said after a moment. I think I needed this. He frowned slightly. Needed what? Someone who doesn't let me get away with my own habits, I replied. He leaned back, considering that. You think I do that? Yeah, I said. You don't let things slide just because they're good enough. That's because you're better than good enough, he said. I shook my head slightly, but I couldn't ignore the way that landed. You really believe that? I said. I don't say things I don't believe, he replied. Right. I already knew that. That's probably why it's hard to argue with you, I muttered. He smiled. You still try. Of course I do. Another pause. Then he said, quieter, I don't mind it. I looked at him. Yeah. I asked. Yeah, he said. It means you care. Something about the way he said that. Not teasing. Not casual. Just certain. It made my chest feel tight in a way I didn't immediately understand. I looked away first. Don't read into that, I said, a little too quickly. I'm not, he replied. But I had a feeling he understood more than he let on. We packed up not long after that. This time, we left together. Not planned. Just happened. Outside, the air was cooler than I expected. Quiet streets, city lights reflecting off empty windows. We walked side by side for a bit without talking. It wasn't awkward. Just calm. Hey, I said after a moment. Yeah. I hesitated. Then, honest again before I could stop myself. I don't think I respect a lot of people, I said. He glanced at me, but didn't interrupt. But I respect you. I finished. There it was. Out loud. Real. For a second, I thought I'd made it weird. Too direct. Too much. But Connor just nodded slightly. Yeah, he said quietly. I know. I frowned. You know? I hoped, he corrected. That was somehow worse. Because it meant he cared about that too. We stopped at the corner where our paths split. This is me, he said. Yeah, I replied. A small pause. Then he added, I respect you too, you know. I let out a quiet breath. Good. He smiled. Good. And then he turned and walked off. I stood there for a second longer than necessary before heading my way. And the whole walk home, one thought kept repeating in my head. I started this seeing him as someone I had to beat. Now, I couldn't imagine doing this without him. And that realization, that changed everything. After that night, something settled between us. Not in a dramatic way. No big conversation. No sudden shift in how we acted around each other. But the tension that used to sit under everything, the quiet competition, the constant need to prove something, it was gone. And what replaced it felt steadier. We worked the same way. Talked the same way. But now there was something underneath it. Trust. Not the kind you announce. The kind you just rely on. It showed up the next time things got difficult. Not a crisis like before. Just pressure. A lot of it. We were presenting again, bigger this time. More people involved, more expectations, more chances for things to go wrong. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I had to carry it alone. We were in the middle of prep when I got stuck again. Not because something was wrong, but because something felt off. I don't like this, I said, staring at the screen. Connor didn't even ask what part. He just moved his chair slightly closer. Where? I pointed. Here. It works, but it's not right. He leaned in, scanning it. I waited. Not impatiently. Not defensively. Just waiting. That's because it doesn't match the tone of the rest, he said after a few seconds. I frowned. Tone. You're shifting how you're framing the idea, he explained. It's more aggressive here. I looked back at it. And again, he was right. I hate that you see that so fast, I muttered. He smiled slightly. You would have caught it. Eventually, I said. You save me time. That's the goal. I glanced at him. That's your goal? Yeah, he said. Not just for me. There was no hesitation in that. No ego. Just clarity. I shook my head slightly. You're weird, you know that. I've heard that too. We fixed it. Quickly. Efficiently. Like it was nothing. But it wasn't nothing. Because a few weeks ago, I would have tried to fix it alone. Would have pushed through until I got it right just to prove I could. Now, I didn't feel the need to. And that was new. The presentation went smoothly again. Better than smoothly. Confident. Clear. Controlled. At one point, I caught Connor glancing at me while I was speaking, not to check me, not to correct anything. Just following. Trusting. And I realized I was doing the same thing when he spoke. Not preparing to jump in. Not waiting for a mistake. Just listening. After it ended, people congratulated us. The usual comments. The usual noise. But I barely registered it. Because the only thing that stood out was how easy it felt standing there next to him. Like we were on the same side. Not two people trying to stand out, but two people who already knew where they stood. Later that day, things slowed down again. Work done. Pressure off. We ended up back at our desks, not really doing anything urgent. You're quieter today, he said. I glanced at him. Am I? Yeah. I thought about it for a second. I think I'm just not overthinking everything for once, I admitted. He nodded. That's good. Yeah, I said. It is. A pause. Then I added, you make that easier. He looked at me, a little surprised. I do, he asked. Yeah, I said. You don't make things feel like a competition. That's because it's not, he replied. It used to be, I said. For you, he corrected gently. I let out a quiet breath. Yeah, I admitted. For me. He didn't push it further. Didn't make it a thing. Just accepted it. And that made it easier to say the next part. I think I needed someone like you, I said. He raised an eyebrow slightly. Like me. Someone who doesn't react the way I expect, I explained. Someone who doesn't make everything about being right. He leaned back, considering that. That's funny, he said. Why? Because I was thinking the same thing, he replied. I frowned slightly. About me? Yeah. I almost laughed. That makes no sense. It does, he said. You push things forward. You don't settle. You don't let anything just sit there unfinished. I shook my head. That's just how I work. Exactly, he said. And it balances me out. That wasn't something I expected to hear. At all. You don't seem like someone who needs balancing, I said. He smiled faintly. Everyone does. I looked at him for a moment. Really looked. And I realized something I hadn't fully admitted yet. This wasn't just respect anymore. It was something deeper. Not romantic. Not complicated. Just real. Like I actually valued him. As a person. Not just as someone I worked with. You know, I said slowly. I used to think I had to do everything on my own to prove something. He nodded slightly. Yeah, I could tell. I smirked. Of course you could. But you don't have to, he added. I held his gaze for a second. I know, I said. And for once, I actually meant it. That evening, we left at the same time again. No plan. Just habit now. We walked in that same quiet rhythm as before. Comfortable silence, broken by small comments that didn't need to be anything more. At the same corner, we stopped again. Same as last time. You heading the same way, he asked. Yeah, I said. For a bit. We walked together a little longer this time. And I realized something else. I didn't feel like I was walking next to someone I used to compete with. I felt like I was walking next to someone I trusted. And that was rare. Hey, he said after a moment. Yeah, you're different lately. I raised an eyebrow. Good different or bad different? Good, he said. Less tense. I let out a quiet laugh. I'll take that. It suits you, he added. I glanced at him. You always this observant. Only when it matters. That stayed with me longer than I expected. We stopped again when our paths split. Same as before. But this time, it didn't feel like the end of something. It just felt like a pause. See you tomorrow, he said. Yeah, I replied. See you. He walked off, and I stood there for a second, like I had before. But this time, I wasn't thinking about competition or proving anything. I was thinking about something simpler. I started out trying to beat him. Now, I just didn't want to lose working with him. And that was a completely different kind of respect. I didn't notice when it stopped being about work. That's the truth. If you'd asked me when exactly Connor stopped being the guy I work well with and became someone I actually looked for during the day, I wouldn't have had a clear answer. It just happened. Somewhere between late evenings, shared glances in meetings, and conversations that had nothing to do with deadlines. It showed up in the smallest ways. Like how I'd walk into the office and immediately check if he was already there, or how a meeting felt slightly off if he wasn't in it, or how I'd catch myself saving a comment or idea not for the room, but because I wanted to hear what he thought about it first. That was new, and if I'm being honest, a little unsettling, because I don't usually rely on people like that. I never had. One morning, I came in earlier than usual. The office was mostly empty, that quiet pre-work calm before everything starts moving. Connor was already there. Of course he was. He was sitting at his desk, coffee untouched, staring at his screen like he'd been there for a while already. Something felt off immediately. "You've been here long?" I asked, dropping my bag. He glanced at me, a little slower than usual. "Yeah, a bit." I frowned. "You look tired." "I am," he said simply. That wasn't like him. Connor usually deflected things like that. Brushed them off. This time, he didn't. I hesitated, then stepped closer. "What happened?" He leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. "Didn't sleep much," he said. "Why?" A pause. Then, quieter than I expected. "Just had a lot on my mind." I studied him. There was no performance in it. No attempt to make it sound smaller than it was. Just honest. "You want to talk about it?" I asked. He looked at me like he was weighing that. Not whether he could. Whether he should. "I don't want to dump it on you," he said. I shrugged slightly. "You're not dumping anything." Another pause. Then he said, "It's just, I've been thinking about where I am right now." "That sounds vague," I said. He gave a small, tired smile. "Yeah, it is." I leaned against the edge of his desk. "Try less vague." He looked down for a second, then back at me. "I spent a lot of time fixing who I was," he said. "How I work. How I handle things." I nodded slowly. "I can see that." "Yeah," he said. "And it worked. I'm better now." There was something in the way he said that. Not pride. Something closer to uncertainty. "But," I asked. He exhaled quietly. "But I don't always know who I am without all that effort," he admitted. That hit harder than I expected. Because it wasn't about work. Not really. It was about him. And for the first time, I realized that the version of Connor I respected so much, the calm, controlled, steady version, was something he had to build, not something that came naturally. "That sounds exhausting," I said. He let out a quiet breath. "Yeah, sometimes." I didn't say anything for a second. Just stood there. Then, before I could overthink it, "You don't have to be like that all the time," I said. He looked at me. "What do you mean?" "I mean," I continued, choosing my words carefully, "you don't have to always have it together. At least, not around me." Silence. Not uncomfortable, but heavier than anything we'd said before. "You're saying that like it's easy," he said. "I'm saying it like it's okay," I replied. He held my gaze for a second longer than usual, like he was trying to decide if he believed me. "I'm not used to that," he admitted. "I figured," I said. That got a small smile out of him. We didn't push the conversation further. Didn't need to. But something shifted again. Not in how we worked. In how we saw each other. Later that day, things went back to normal on the surface. Meetings. Work. Conversations. But underneath it, there was something quieter. More personal. At one point, I caught him watching me during a discussion. Not critically. Not analytically. Just present. And for once, I didn't look away. That evening, we stayed late again. Not because we had to. Because neither of us was in a rush to leave. At some point, I said, "You know, you don't have to figure everything out all the time." He glanced at me. "You really believe that?" "Yeah," I said. "Some things just settle on their own." He was quiet for a moment. Then, softer, "You always this patient?" I smirked slightly. "No, just with you, apparently." That made him laugh. A real one. Not the quiet, controlled version. And something about that. It stuck with me. We packed up later than usual. Walked out together, like we always did now. The city felt quieter. Or maybe it was just us. "You're easier to be around than I expected," he said suddenly. I raised an eyebrow. "That's almost a compliment." "It is a compliment." "I'll take it then." A pause. Then I added, "You are too." He glanced at me. "Yeah. Yeah," I said. "Once you stop pretending you have everything figured out." He shook his head slightly, smiling. "I don't pretend." "You do," I said. "Just less now." He didn't argue that. Which told me everything. We reached the same corner again. Stopped. Same routine. But it didn't feel routine anymore. "You good?" I asked. He nodded. "Yeah." Then, after a second, "Better, actually." I held his gaze for a moment. "Good," I said. He didn't move right away. Neither did I. And for a second, there was something there. Not something we named. Not something we acted on. Just something. Then he stepped back slightly. See you tomorrow, he said. Yeah, I replied. See you. He walked off, and I stood there again. But this time, the thought in my head was different. I started this thinking he was someone I had to compete with, then someone I respected. Now I was starting to realize he was someone I actually cared about, and that was a whole different kind of shift. I didn't realize how much Connor had become part of my routine until the day he wasn't there. It was small at first. An empty chair. No quiet morning when I walked in. No second perspective when I opened something that didn't feel quite right. I told myself it didn't matter. People take days off. That's normal. Still, the day felt off. Slower. Less grounded. By midday, I caught myself checking my phone more than usual. Not because I expected a message. Just because I noticed the absence. That was the part one couldn't ignore. Connor wasn't just someone I worked well with anymore. He was someone who changed how I moved through the day. And without him there, everything felt slightly out of sync. The next day, he was back. Same desk. Same calm presence. But something about him felt lighter. You're back, I said, a little more direct than I meant to. He glanced up, a small smile forming. I am. I nodded, trying to play it off. Yesterday was quieter. I figured it would be, he said. I frowned. You figured. You don't like working without a second perspective, he replied. I opened my mouth to argue, then stopped. Okay, that's annoyingly accurate, I admitted. He smiled slightly. I know. I studied him for a second. You seem better, I said. I am, he replied. Something in his tone made me pause. Better how? I asked. He leaned back in his chair, thinking for a second. Just clearer, he said. I stopped trying to overthink everything. I raised an eyebrow. Took your own advice, huh? He glanced at me. Took yours. That hit. Not in a dramatic way. Just quietly. You actually listened to me? I asked. Yeah, he said simply. I do that. I let out a soft breath, shaking my head slightly. Good, I said. Because I meant it. I know. A pause. Then, before I could overthink it. You don't always have to hold everything together, I added. He looked at me. And this time, there was no hesitation in his expression. I'm starting to believe that, he said. That was it. That was the moment I knew something had fully shifted. Not just in how I saw him, in how he saw himself. And somehow, I'd been part of that. The rest of the day felt easy again. Natural. Like everything had fallen back into place but stronger this time. At one point, we were working through something, and I instinctively turned to him before even finishing my thought. He caught it immediately. Go on, he said. I smirked slightly. You already know what I'm going to say. Probably, he replied. But I still want to hear it. And that was it. That's simple. That's steady. No competition. No pressure. Just understanding. Later that evening, we walked out together again. Same street. Same rhythm. But this time, I didn't feel like I needed to figure anything out. Not about him. Not about us. Because whatever this weighs, it didn't need a label. It just worked. We reached the corner. Stopped. Same as always. But I didn't rush to leave this time. Hey, I said. Yeah. I looked at him. And for once, I didn't hold anything back. I used to think you were someone I had to beat, I said. He didn't interrupt. I really believed that. I continued. Like if I didn't stay ahead of you, I'd fall behind. He nodded slightly. I got that impression. I huffed a quiet laugh. Yeah, I wasn't subtle. No, he agreed. A small pause. Then I said more seriously. But I was wrong. He held my gaze. You weren't someone I had to beat, I said. You were someone I needed to learn from. Silence. Not awkward. Just real. And now, he asked quietly. I exhaled slowly. Now I respect you more than anyone I've worked with, I said. There it was. Complete. Honest. Final. Something in his expression shifted, not surprise, not disbelief. Something softer. Something that meant he understood exactly what that cost me to say. That means a lot, he said. I know, I replied. A small smile. Then he said, just as steady. I respect you too. Not just for how you work, but for how you changed. That caught me off guard. Changed. I repeated. Yeah, he said. You let someone in instead of pushing them out. I didn't answer right away, because he wasn't wrong, and I hadn't even realized I was doing it. Guess I got lucky too, I said finally. He smiled slightly. Yeah. We stood there for a second longer. Then he stepped back. See you tomorrow, Gilbert. Yeah, I said. See you. He turned and walked off. And this time, I didn't stand there wondering what any of it meant. I already knew. I started this seeing him as a rival, someone I had to prove myself against. But somewhere along the way, that changed. I didn't just stop competing with him. I started respecting him. And not because he was better than me, but because he made me better too. And that's not something you compete with. That's something you keep.